Hey there guys, today we are looking at a new dungeon crawling action RPG with a nice voxel art style by, I believe, Open Realms is their name? And it just recently got put on Steam. It is a fairly new arrival and I wanted to show it off because it's getting some pretty good reception, and that's for a good reason. First of all, you can moonwalk. That is very important in any game, I feel. The ability to moonwalk, not only to moonwalk, but actually to moon roll. Yes. With a dragon following you. Moon roll. Anyway, the game is an action RPG kind of in the style of, you know, the Diablo style with the loot and everything, only it is a more hack and slash combat style. As you can very clearly see, I am combating with hacking and slashing, as well as throwing alchemy bombs all over the town. I'm sure they don't mind. But it is actually quite the good little thing. I must admit, have a couple of problems with it that I'll go on to kind of in the middle, but overall I really enjoy the game. I think it's a good amount of fun. It has a pretty cool class system, which I think we'll start in with just because I have a level up point to spin, so I might as well show you that from the beginning. The system is actually a multi-classing system, and you actually pick a class to start the game out as, but this class is not actually important. It doesn't restrict you in any way. There are no items that can only be used by certain classes and things like that. It only really decides what equipment and ability you start with. Other than that, you can put points into any class you want, no matter what the combination. So I like to make a kind of spell swordy character, which is why I have this magic sword. So if I show you, just ignore all of this holy crap massive wall of text for a minute. I'll get onto that later. First, here is the classing skill tree system, and the way this works is every time you level up, of course, you'll be given a point and skill point, and your and skill point can be put into any of these trees, and you start out with access to warrior, mage, and rogue, and then once you've put 7 points into each tree, it unlocks the 2 below it, which are kind of like prestige class style advancements. So I've been putting a lot into mage and then wizard, because wizard, these next 2 here have like the really powerful stuff. So as you can see, your warrior is your pretty basic physical damage dealer. Your rogue is definitely your rogue or thiefy, I guess. Yeah, your roguey thiefy archetype with all kinds of throwing daggery stuff, bombs, poison, things like that. Every skill tree seems to have 3 active and 3 passive abilities, each one with 3 ranks each. So this game definitely goes for the rule of 3. And then the knight is very much a tanky, almost paladin-y class. Spectral sword, that sounds cool. Barbarian is your big physical DPS. You can, you know, drag and shout and stuff, which is cool. Your thief is actually kind of more like a Nightblade style with cool kind of magical thievery abilities, and then gadgeteer is, of course, you know, your gadget-using gnomish thief. You got cool things like spider mines, a flame turret, and sentry guns, which is pretty cool. And then your wizard is your big damage-dealing thing. I've got a lot into this. This plasma orb is a big AoE burst. This frost missile, which you'll see me use a lot because it's absurdly powerful, is awesome. And then the meteor swarm, I mean, it's a meteor swarm, what else do I need to say? And then Mystic has some cool stuff. It's kind of druid-ish, but it does have the ability to summon a swarm of chickens, which is very important for any game, I feel. So the way the game is actually structured, let me show you. Well, first, let me show you, this is the town. I made the same mistake twice. This is the town that you'll begin in. You have your license bureau, which it's integral to the story of the game. I won't talk about the story too much, but it's pretty funny. It doesn't take itself too seriously, but it actually does have its serious moments. It's kind of interesting, really. But he'll tell you where you need to go next, and there are some story events. You have to talk to Mr. Solomon the Wise Owl there. You also have a forge, so it's basically buying and selling for armor and weapons, as well as crafting tables, which, again, I'll show you the crafting system later. And you have Gypsy's Brew over here, which is a potion shop. There are various types of buffing and healing potions that you can get. As you can see, I have like a crap ton of them. And then Dragon's Corset, the very provocatively named... It's actually a pet store. As you can see, I have a little baby Dagron following me around. My little red Dargon is quite the nice pet, and there are other pets you can get, and they actually level up with you. So, moving on, the game is structured in 2 main phases, I guess you could say, kind of Zelda-ish. You have these areas, so let me just teleport to this one really quick, that are overworld areas. They are your large open, as you can see here, it's fairly open. little areas that lead up to the main meat of the game, which is the dungeons, and there's one for each. So the swamp has the primal dungeon, which is very much like ancient ruins with traps and poisonous darts and things in the walls. You got this desert, which leads to the fire dungeon, which is as you would expect. You have mountains, which are icy, of course lead to an ice dungeon, and a forest for the kind of nature-y dungeon. So you're probably seeing lots of little similarities to games like Zelda. And, of course, the game does feel like that, but if you're thinking, by the way, of the game 3D Dot Game Heroes on the PS3, which was also a voxel-style RPG meant to evoke Zelda, this isn't quite the same, because that game was very much meant to be almost exactly like Zelda. It was meant to be the classic Zelda reborn in a different way. This is not that at all. This is more of an ARPG with a heavy focus on loot and story progression and things like that. So, we're going to go into the fire dungeon, of which I have a waypoint down at level 2. Every 2 levels you get a waypoint. The areas tend to last for 8 levels, and then on the 5th floor of each dungeon it will change up and become different. You'll get a different layout with different enemy types, different room types, and it usually becomes harder and more interesting, I guess you could say. So here we are on the 2nd floor of the fire dungeon. Now, the overworld and every dungeon is actually randomly generated. Which is very nice. I like random generation in games like this. It helps the experience out. I mean, Diablo was randomly generated, so there you go. And for all these levels, you can actually, when you load your save, choose to rebuild the world if you want to, and it will sort of regenerate all of the overworld areas and all of the dungeon floors. So if you want to kind of rerun everything differently, you can actually do that, which I think is a nice little feature that they've added in there. That helps. Again, it's kind of longevity, which is always useful. So this is the main meat of the game. This is your dungeon crawling. And as you can see, it has a nice little action-y combat system. It is based very much on hacking and slashing. And one thing to start off with that I really like is that it has that kind of cleaving effect with your weapon. And what I mean is your weapon tends to go through swathes of enemies. In a lot of Diablo-style games, only the enemy you click is actually the one that takes damage. Unless you're using some sort of cleaving weapon that has that effect deliberately. I really want that rune, but I cannot get it. This upsets me. I also forgot to put my point in my class like a doofus. But one thing is, since you don't really click on enemies per se, it is in fact more of a hack and slash combat system. You actually will hit multiple enemies, that's a crafting table, when you swing your weapon, which makes the combat feel very good. The combat feels responsive, very much so, because, I mean, there's not a missed chance per se. It's a good hack and slash, not extremely complex or anything, but a good hack and slash combat system. It's very functional. It doesn't necessarily do anything extremely special, but then again, it doesn't really need to, because it has a good loot system. Now, this brings me on to some of my issues with the game that I kind of want to put in the middle. This is very much a compliment sandwich for this game. I have a couple of problems with it that I want to kind of put in the middle, but the rest of it I do very much like, and my problems with it are really only because I'm enjoying it quite a bit, and the little issues make it a bit more apparent that you're enjoying the game quite a bit, but these little issues are keeping you from enjoying it maybe as much as you could. My main issue is with the UI of the game. The GUI is good, it looks good, and it's very functional. There's nothing explicitly wrong with the menus and the interface. However, it has a problem when it comes to dealing with certain things like your loot. As you saw earlier, my loot screen, my inventory is basically just a massive wall of objects. And that can be a little disorienting to navigate at first. There's no sort function, for instance, which would be good. But I feel like there was one simple way that they could actually solve pretty much all of the issues, at least almost all of the issues I actually have with the interface, and that would be adding shift modifiers. Now, I'm going to go into the inventory and let you see what I'm talking about. So first of all, as you can see, it's just a huge wall of just things, which isn't necessarily the best idea. However, I kind of want to equip these just to see what they're like. It has some odd inconsistencies. For instance, there are 3 different redundant ways to actually equip an item, for instance. So, like you saw there, I can drag it into one of the slots to equip it. I could also, say, double-click on an item and then hit equip, which is just fine. Or I could double click on the slot I want it to go to and then choose the item and equip it like that. So there are like multiple different ways to do the same thing, which I like because maybe, you know, I'm using a mouse, but maybe if you're using a controller, or maybe if you're using, say, a laptop touchpad, some of the other methods, like dragging and dropping, wouldn't be as easy or even possible. So I like having multiple methods. The problem is that some of the other things you need to do don't have multiple methods, and it makes things more fiddly than they need to be. So, for instance, you see that a lot of items have these sockets on them. It's obvious because it's an action RPG, so there are lots of items with sockets, and you have these runes that you can put into those sockets to make them more powerful. Very important part of any sort of action RPG with that loot system in. The issue is that you can only, for instance, go to mess with your socketed items in a very specific way. You have to double click on the item and then hit sockets. And from here you can drag and drop or double click or whatever you want to equip whatever you have to the weapon. The problem is this is really fiddly. For instance, if I wanted to, and as much stuff as the game drops on you, of course you're going to be changing your equipment out fairly frequently. Which means, say, if I got a different weapon I wanted to replace my magic sword with, I would have to double click, go, remove all my runes, unequip the sword, re-equip the new one, double click on it, and then put the runes back in. And it makes the whole process take a lot longer than it needs to. And when you're having to do that for every piece of equipment, you may have to do that like 3 or 4 times when you go to your inventory screen, and it gets really obnoxious kind of quickly. The easy way to solve this, I think, as you can see here, you can probably hear, I'm clicking, right-clicking, and this menu doesn't actually do anything. If, say, right-clicking or shift-clicking took you automatically to the rune screen, it would be a little easier. But things like shift modifiers or control modifiers, like holding the shift and control key and clicking, don't do anything, just like right-clicking. So I feel like if they added that kind of functionality in, it would make the menus easier to navigate. And overall, that would solve pretty much every problem I have with it. It would be nice, for instance, if, say, I had a rune that I wanted to put in an item that I had equipped, and there was an empty socket, like this purple one, for instance. If I could just drag it from my inventory and plop it in there. Obviously, this isn't a rune that goes in that slot, but you get the idea. You can't actually do that. Like, if there's an empty rune, you can't do that, and double-clicking on it only lets you drop it. You have to go to that other menu. So I think that just adding a couple of easier ways to do this stuff would make the kind of micromanagement of your inventory way easier and less annoying. That's really the only main problem I have with it. Other than that, playing the game is fine. It's just that going with the menu system is a little annoying. The other thing is selling items. In the shop screen, you have this screen to the right, and the left half is taken up by the shop interface, which makes complete sense. That's normal. The problem is if you want to sell something, you either have to double click on it and then hit sell for every single individual item you want to sell, and when you have this much stuff that, your finger is going to explode before you're halfway through. Or you can click and drag it onto their menu, which again, if you have to do that for every single item, it takes forever. So that makes selling things annoying. Again, either right-clicking or shift-click modifiers, things like that would make that process much easier. That's really my main issue with the game right now. Otherwise, it's very enjoyable. So let's just go back. Also, there's no back button. You have to hit escape to get out of menus, which is kind of annoying, but that's just a tiny pet peeve. That's not really an issue. So anyway, back to the actual hacking and slashing. The game itself has a fairly robust combat system, and as you can see, the abilities are quite nice. There are lots of abilities to choose from, with that would be 9 different classes, I guess, each with 3 actives and then 3 passives. So that's fairly significant, and of course, as you probably also noticed, there's a lot of weapon variety, and the weapons do act differently. For instance, this is a magic sword. Now, this is one of the less various weapons, I guess you could say, because it basically just attacks exactly the same as the normal sword, but it does magic damage. Every weapon also has a charge attack, like this. Well, almost every weapon. I'll get onto that later. It would be nice if, say, the charge attack for the magic sword actually, like, shot out a slash, like an airwave slash or something, instead of the normal sword's spin attack, but, again, pet peeve, doesn't really matter, small issue. And there are some items, however. So this is how these attack. Okay. I could see these being useful if they were upgraded. Some weapons like, alright, that's awesome. Some weapons like throwing daggers don't actually have a charge attack. Instead, they are very, very rapid fire. So they allow you to do like very high DPS and kite enemies around and stuff like that. And that comes on to another point of the game in its favor. It is very co-op focused. Now, as you can see, I'm doing just fine solo. The game is completely, totally playable as a solo experience if you want to. However, the game is very much a co-op, like, you're meant to play it in co-op, I guess you could say. That's kind of the best way to play it. So much so that they even have a 4-pack for sale on the Steam page, like a lot of good co-op focused games do. And the co-op features are actually very robust. It has good netcode, it seems to. You can do online drop-in, drop-out co-op very easily with your friends. And the game seems to scale quite well also with friends and things like that. So that means that the co-op experience is pretty good. It is quite a satisfying romp. And with all of the, crazy loot and different weapon varieties and class abilities, that means that the synergy of classes and their abilities and all the different weapon sets and things like that make for a pretty varied and interesting multiplayer experience, which I very much approve of. I like variety, as you probably realize on this channel. I'm a very variety-driven kind of gamer. I like to focus on things like that because it just adds extra longevity for me. And it is very much there. That's definitely something that they have obviously cared about. They didn't just put in the co-op as a checkbox, like, well, it has to have co-op, so there you go. No, it very much benefits from its co-op, and its co-op is well implemented. So, what else to talk about? Well, the actual crafting system is fairly interesting as well. Now, crafting doesn't work like you'd think. You don't actually create new items. There are 2 different kinds of crafting tables in the game. You saw one earlier, it had a bunch of gems on it. That allows you to put new sockets into items, as well as change the color of current sockets on items, so you can kind of min-max your items that way. It's very expensive though, so be careful. Also, the main system of crafting is actually leveling your items up, which is cool. Every weapon and piece of armor, as you can see, has a level to it, level 16. And this means I've crafted it 10 times. You can actually craft an item up to 10 times to make it 10 levels higher than it started. So these battle axes could theoretically go up to level 27, for instance. The crafting system is pretty fun. I like upgrading items and stuff like that. It's a fun thing to see. Basically, you have to find these blacksmith tables, and they allow you to upgrade your stuff by basically sacrificing other items of that same type. So if I wanted to level up a weapon, then I could basically consume other weapons that I'm not using to increase its level. And also, you noticed me picking up those gems earlier. The gems are another way. They are kind of the, oops, did not mean to do that, kind of the main way to upgrade your stuff. They put a lot of experience towards actually leveling your items up. So you put in items and gems and some gold, and then craft your chosen items up to 10 levels higher than they started, making them more and more powerful. So this allows you to min-max individual items, then of course you can add sockets to them, basically make your dream equipment. You can do this for everything. Weapons, armors, every type of armor as well, helmets, gloves, everything. And you can also do it with the runes, the socketable runes. There are a lot of different runes in the game. And it's actually a very important system because they are quite powerful, especially once they're leveled up through crafting. However, runes pretty much always start at level 1. Their max is level 10, and they are very expensive to level. You could spend dozens of other runes and gems and over 5,000 gold just to level up a single rune to 10. So they are very much they're one of those kind of overarching investment style things that a lot of good action RPG crafting systems tend to have. Kind of like the really high level stuff in Diablo 3 with the later vendors that you get for crafting. The things you have to work towards. Very much like that. And of course, all this comes together to mean more variety for both you and possible co-op partners, and just more interesting variety for your equipment. You can have some pretty cool runes. I have a lot of runes, for instance, that upgrade my magic damage and my mana so that I can spam really, really absurdly powerful spells and like one-shot stuff. It's pretty great, and it makes you feel really good to see your kind of hard work on your items come together to make something interesting. Now, one other minor issue I have with the game is this. If you notice when I walk over this gold here, sometimes it has a slight delay between walking over something and picking it up. This is especially true with hearts, although I can't show you because I'm at full health, so I can't pick up that heart. But in a game that's very much about loot, where tons of different kinds of loot drops near constantly, it is kind of annoying to have this slight delay, this little thing that sometimes makes you have to walk over different pieces of loot multiple times in order to pick it up. It's very annoying. As you'll probably see here with all this loot on the screen, it takes a minute to actually pick it all up. It's very bad with gold and hearts. Sometimes you'll actually have to double back, maybe even 2 or 3 times to pick up a heart and other pieces of loot. It's not a big deal, again, but when it comes to a game that's very much focused on giving you tons of loot, it is somewhat annoying. Now, I can show you the crafting system. So let's say, for instance, I wanted to upgrade these battle axes, which I do. I select them, and then I can pour in other items that I happen to have, like this. And as you can see, this experience bar will raise, and I can level them up to 10 times. And every item I put in, different grades, increases at a different amount. You can also put in those gems I showed you earlier, and different kinds of gems are used for different kinds of equipment. So for weapons like this, it's amethyst and topaz, as it turns out, and I have like 8 trillion of each, so that's fine. Also, some blue items will raise the level a bit faster. And this is again where that kind of the fiddliness of the interface comes into play. Also, this game has guitars as weapons, by the way. I love guitars in any game ever. I'm keeping them. And this means that you actually have to double-click individually on every single thing you want to put in. Very annoying. I don't understand why that's necessary. Again, this is where shift modifiers could come in handy. Instead of having to double-click on every little thing, you could totally just say, click one thing, hold shift, click another, and then have it select that and everything in between. As long as it wasn't too much to actually raise the level higher than it can go, up to 10. Obviously, if that happens, then it only selects as much as it can before it hits level 10. So again, this is fiddly. It makes me want to do the leveling less than otherwise I would want to, because it's really fun and I like making my stuff more powerful. It's a good feeling, but my finger breaking from having to click 8 trillion times to level it up is not the best feeling. Kind of annoying. Again, this is a thing that I feel could easily be solved with shift modifiers in the game. But anyway, hit combine, and then boom, the chicken will bang out your new equipment for you. What a nice chicken. And there you go. Now I have level 27 battle axes that I can probably not do much with because they're white with no sockets. But I wanted to level them up to show you anyway. Holy crap, 300 DPS. Never mind, turns out I can do a lot with them. I also wanted some physical damage because, just like Diablo, by the way, some enemies can have special effects under their names. Things like immune to magic damage, or like heavy magic armor, or demon touch, I think it's called, which makes every enemy attack send out these red shockwaves in front of them, or acid throwing, and things like that. So, yeah, that's pretty much my opinion, I guess. Let's wrap it up. So, it is a very nice little voxel-style ARPG, and I know some people don't like the voxel art style. Personally, I really like it when it's done well, and I feel that this one is done well. And if you want to know what the difference between one that's not done very well and one that is, well, as you can see here, everything has its own style. They don't just use these kind of generic blocky-headed things for everything. Even individual enemies very much have personality. These turrets are these kind of big, dark steel things. The enemies, like the lizardmen, are very angular, and everything has a specific appearance that looks quite nice. And there's actually a lot of detail in every little voxel placed that makes things look like they obviously have had effort put into their design, and that's how that's what I would consider a good art style. So yeah, I very much do like the art style. It is at a fair price, I feel, for the amount of content you're getting. As you can see, there's a crap ton of different kinds of enemies, lots of items, weapons, loot, places to go, a nice co-op system, and it is $15. So that's not too bad, 15 bucks. And if you want, you can buy the 4-pack for $45, which basically means you're only paying for 3 of the 4. That's nice. Oh dear, this weaponsmith is very upset. I'm not going to sell you anything right now because it would take the entire video literally to sell everything, but that's okay. Ooh, that is a powerful pistol. How much is that? 800? Yeah, I'll buy it. Why not? I could probably use that later. There's a stash, by the way, a stash chest that you can put all your stuff in. The boss fights in the game have actually been really nice. Very enjoyable boss fights, full of pretty unique designs, and I've seen no reused bosses at all. Every boss has been its own unique appearance and fight. And the soundtrack for the game, by the way, is really good. The music is excellent. The boss violin theme, when the bosses show up and it gives you that Zelda-style name and title for the boss, the violin theme that kicks in when that happens is awesome. I actually kind of wish that that music would continue to play for the rest of the boss fight because it's really good. But, yeah, so I feel like you're getting a lot for your money here, especially if you have a friend that you want to play with, because I feel like you will definitely get a lot out of the co-op experience for this. It is, it's geared towards that very heavily, and it shows, but it also doesn't make you feel like you're not playing it correctly if you're only doing it solo. It's still very enjoyable. So yeah, it's also very lighthearted. It's got, you know, lots of little parodies of tropes that you see in, you know, your kind of big hero action RPGs, and it's actually got a fairly good story. It's kind of touching. It's got some little heartwarming characters, some nice little moments, and of course your lovely banter between the NPCs leaves some interesting references and things in the dialogue, including what is very obviously Alphonse Elric's armor from Fullmetal Alchemist in the blacksmith shop. Very clearly that's what it is. But, I think that's pretty much all I've got to say, to be honest. It is a very good game, actually. I've been enjoying my time with it quite a lot. The very light-hearted story with some actually pretty interesting little elements as to what it really means to be a hero, and actually some kind of serious notes to it, which you might not expect. You might expect it to be funny, happy parody time the entire way through, but it actually isn't necessarily. There's actually a character that's part of a specific organization that you'll meet about halfway through that puts a little bit of a more serious note onto the game. That, of course, still has its own style very much. But yeah, so if this is something that interests you, I definitely would recommend picking it up. It is available on Steam right now for $15. I'll link you in the description, of course, as I always do, because I'm just a nice person like that. You're welcome. And if there's any more questions, comments, feel free to leave them. Anything else you want to see, feel free to ask. I probably won't ignore it if I'm feeling like it. Okay, jokes. I will totally look at it. And also, by the way, there's a little Bejeweled minigame. For some reason, when you're gathering those gems that you saw earlier, there's actually, in every level, a little rainbow vein where you can play a little minigame that's basically a match 3 Bejeweled to collect gems. I don't know why I felt the need to mention that, I just think it's kind of a cool little distraction. But anyway, good game, good content, needs a little bit of work on the UI side. That I feel like that's something that the developers could actually solve fairly easily. It feels like shift modifiers or something like that would not actually be that difficult to implement. It's not something that I feel would require, like, you know, 4 engine rebuilds and 20 more years of development time. I feel that maybe that they could possibly do that. So yeah, I would support these guys. They made something pretty cool. Thanks very much for watching, everyone, and I'll see you next time.